But a day in the life of a college Brendan Rosseau, oh man. Thankfully, with football, they usually get you up pretty early. So usually we'd wake up and we'd have some kind of lift in the morning or some kind of athletic thing. That's something I've always loved. It's just like it forces you to get out of bed and you start off your day on the right foot. So that's good. You go, you get breakfast. You're always hungry. You go to Driscoll Dining Hall, and the staff gives you a bunch of fried eggs and some sausages and stuff like that, which is great. That was one of my favorite breakfast time after lifts. Was one of my favorite experiences. And then usually a couple classes. Some of my favorites actually were like my sociology classes. That was an example of something that I never had taken a class on before. Didn't know a whole lot about it, but just dipping my toes into a completely unfamiliar field, I ended up learning the most about it. That's some of the classes I remember the best. So those were fantastic. And then usually, because they were my majors, I would have either an astro or an econ class. Those were great. I don't know if I'd call them fun, but they were interesting and always challenging, which is something I really liked. And then, we'd have another practice or something in the afternoon. One thing that I loved about Williams was that they had a great music center, and playing piano is something I've done for a long time and I still love doing. So I usually, after practice or something, de-stress a little bit, go bang on the keys for a while, play some song, usually pretty badly, but that's all right. The rooms are soundproof, so you only have to listen to yourself. After that, go home and work or go to the library and work for a while. That's one thing about Williams, was that coming from a school like Exeter, you expect and know how to deal with a lot of kind of hard work. You know that you have a ton of homework and stuff like that, but Williams is a whole nother level. It was a whole nother level. It's a lot and a lot of work, but it's one of those things where it's also super rewarding, because the deeper you go into it, the more you get out of it. So
welcome guys. Today I am joined by a really special guest. We have Brendan Rosseau tuning in from Los Angeles. He's had a really unique journey. Really fascinated to hear about the work he's been doing, especially related to the space business. But yeah, Brendan, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself real quick to the audience? Who are you? Where are you from? What's your deal?
Absolutely, sure. And Kevin, great to see you. I think it's been a long time since we've last seen each other, so great chance to catch up, if nothing else. But yeah, for those of you who in the audience who I haven't met, my name is Brendan Rosseau, Exeter class 2015, Williams class 2019. As Kevin mentioned, I'm currently working in the space industry. I'm a senior consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton, working on acquisition of military, civil, and commercial space systems. So kind of a mouthful, but essentially, just kind of in the gears of the space system. It's been a really cool journey, and it's still a really cool journey with lots of twists and turns. Each level, high school, college, everything. It's certainly not been like a straight, clear path, but it's been a fun one. It's been interesting, and looking forward to sharing with you, Kev.
So you're telling me that when you were like 15 or 16, you weren't, I'm going to work at Booz Allen Hamilton, I'm going to
No, not at all. Not at all. It's funny. So I guess looking back, the first point I can point to is just really being interested in like the most casual, amateur kind of way in space. I always loved my hometown planetarium, the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. I love space. I love TV shows about space. That was all I really knew about it. I kind of just found myself, no pun intended, gravitating towards space stuff. And I did lots of other stuff too. I played football. I did all kinds of stuff. I love English. I love history. But I more and more found myself really just being interested in, what's out there. How do we know what we know about the universe? What does it say about us? And every aspect of it too. The hard science elements of it, of, the astrophysical concepts and everything. That's really interesting to me. But also, maybe even more than that, the way in which space has always been a really important part of the human story. Looking as far back as we can tell as a species, people have always been interested in space. Some of the earliest cave paintings are not only recordings of the stars, and for information of like when are the seasons changing, so we can track the herd. So real scientific, quote unquote, data, but also obviously they anthropomorphize them into things that they loved and cared about and were fascinated in. And you can trace that history of the human relationship with space from the earliest days all the way up until now. And for me, the more I learned about it, from prehistory to classical Arabia and Greece and ancient China and everything like that, all the way through the scientific revolution, and then the dawn of the Enlightenment, the early space age, everything like that. It's just a fascinating story, and it is one that is heating up now. It's one of those industries where history is meeting the present, and it will lead to a really interesting future. And I found myself kind of just swept up in this current where I was like, this is, I think, what I really like. There wasn't one big aha moment. It was just kind of dipping my toes in, and then more and more and more. I was like, I kind of woke up one day. I was like, is this what I'm doing? Is this going to be my calling, or, the rest of my life? And I've loved it. I really loved it. So I guess this is the longest possible way of saying this, but started in high school loving that. The first real big decision was actually going to Exeter, transferring from my public school, which is never part of the plan at all. I just found a brochure one day my junior year, and I was like, oh, this seems cool. Let me apply, probably get rejected, but hey, whatever. Ended up getting in, and a huge draw was the astronomy program. The moment I knew I really wanted to go to Exeter is when I saw the Granger Observatory, the domes there. I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I didn't know this existed. I thought this is like something out of a movie that only it's like Zoe 101 facilities, crazy high school experience. Yeah, that was a big one. And then choosing to go to Williams largely for not only their astronomy and astrophysics program, but also their really strong economics program is something that I really want to do. And also just the vibe of the school, the culture, the student experience. I love that. And then the next big decision after that was, coming out to LA to really firmly establish myself as like a space guy. I love it. It's been a crazy journey, one that I really loved every step of the way.
That's sensational. So you're telling me that human beings have always been interested in space, including you, starting in Chicago, Adler Planetarium. You're right. I also took astronomy with Mr. Blackwell at Exeter, and I will never forget, like, he pulled out his intense laser pointer. It points out to the stars. And pointing out like Cleopatra's throne and Orion's belt and all this really wonderful constellations. And we would like have some really interesting discussions about, how can you calculate when the sun is closest to the earth and these kinds of things, and how people discover it in the first place. And I heard you also mention Williams. You mentioned the community and also the academics. I don't want to focus too much on Exeter. I think that a lot of high schoolers would be more interested in Williams and the Williams vibe.
Sure, yeah.
Also the things that you studied there. So maybe we can use that as a launching point. What led you to Williams?
That's a great question. Williams was another one of those decisions that it wasn't that I had my heart set, as a freshman in high school, I was like, oh, if I do really well, then, Williams is a place I'll go. I really was trying to figure out, what do I want in a college? And in high school, my idea of what the right college for me looked like evolved a ton. Originally, I went to a very large, 4,000 kid high school in Chicago, which I love. And so it seemed natural to me that the next step from high school to college would mean a bigger school with more people, with, the big football program and, a lot of school spirit and everything like that. That's just what my kind of Midwest vision of college always seemed like. And I still think that would have been a lot of fun. Part of me always wishes, I went to a Michigan or something like that. But I kind of decided that being at a school where people really know each other and people really engage with one another, a school that has a strong sense of identity and above all kind of one of community, was something that I realized is really important to me. That's something I got from Exeter. I'm just loving knowing people around, having a close group of friends. And, at your graduation, everyone who walks across the stage, you either know them, had a meal with them, had a class with them. They, in some small way, were kind of part of you and part of your experience. That was something that was really special for me. So you throw all that in with the athletic recruitment process and everything like that, and Williams became a very clear number one. And just the second I stepped on campus after doing, tons of college visits and meeting lots of people, I could tell that people really strong sense of community, and that this was a place for people that when they left, they kept coming back, they kept returning to it. It's such a tight, knit group of people that it felt special. It really felt special being there. And that was something to me that left a strong impression. And when I left, I said, this is something I want to be a part of. And it was, I'm glad to say, a great decision. It was a great experience.
You did a lot at Williams. You played football, double majored. I mean, how did you manage all those things at the same time? Maybe you could also walk us through, like, it was a while ago, but it wasn't that long ago. What did like a typical day in the life of Brendan Rosseau at Williams look like?
Oh man, that's a good question. So yeah, you mentioned there was a lot of stuff that I was interested in. That was part of the reason why I wanted to go to a school like Williams, a liberal arts school that kind of it exposes you to so many different kinds of things and actually forces you to look at things maybe you didn't even consider in the first place. That was one thing I really resonated with. So I think when you're looking at it on paper, it looks like, I was doing tons of stuff in all different directions. But that was one thing I really liked. It was definitely a challenge at first, just like transitioning to any new environment. You have to learn how much you can bite off and what you need to prioritize at every step. So there was a transition period where I came in, and the first time we had our first like clubs, here's the clubs that we have available. I went and I think I signed up for like the mailing list for like every club. I was like, yeah, rock climbing club, why not? Tree climbing club, sure, I'll do that. Debate, everything. I signed up for literally everything, and to the point where like my email became unusable because I was like, there were just thousands of emails that I had never even read. But then after a while, I think just through kind of trial and error and a lot of error, you figure out what you really need to focus on, what you devote your precious time to, and the things that you can't. So over the course of 4 years, I really drilled down on, the 4 or 5 or 6 different groups and experiences and communities that I really resonated with, and devoted a lot of my resources and time to that. So that was a great experience. But a day in the life of a college Brendan Rosseau, oh man. Thankfully, with football, they usually get you up pretty early. So usually we'd wake up and we'd have some kind of lift in the morning or some kind of athletic thing. That's something I've always loved. It's just like it forces you to get out of bed and you start off your day on the right foot. So that's good. You go, you get breakfast. You're always hungry. You go to Driscoll Dining Hall, and the staff gives you a bunch of fried eggs and some sausages and stuff like that, which is great. That was one of my favorite breakfast time after lifts. Was one of my favorite experiences. And then usually a couple classes. Some of my favorites actually were like my sociology classes. That was an example of something that I never had taken a class on before. Didn't know a whole lot about it, but just dipping my toes into a completely unfamiliar field, I ended up learning the most about it. That's some of the classes I remember the best. So those were fantastic. And then usually, because they were my majors, I would have either an astro or an econ class. Those were great. I don't know if I'd call them fun, but they were interesting and always challenging, which is something I really liked. And then, we'd have another practice or something in the afternoon. One thing that I loved about Williams was that they had a great music center, and playing piano is something I've done for a long time and I still love doing. So I usually, after practice or something, de-stress a little bit, go bang on the keys for a while, play some song, usually pretty badly, but that's all right. The rooms are soundproof, so you only have to listen to yourself. After that, go home and work, or go to the library and work for a while. That's one thing about Williams, was that coming from a school like Exeter, you expect and know how to deal with a lot of kind of hard work. You know that you have a ton of homework and stuff like that. But Williams is a whole nother level. It was a whole nother level. It's a lot and a lot of work, but it's one of those things where it's also super rewarding, because the deeper you go into it, the more you get out of it. So it was good. It was good. Usually a lot of kind of late nights and some early mornings, but that makes for a really valuable college experience, I feel like.
Action-packed day, no big deal. Astro, econ, sociology, 2 practices, morning lift, football, and then gonna de-stress by playing some piano at night. A really packed day, Brendan.
It was, yeah, they were packed. But one thing that was always amazing to me was you are surrounded by, like, you think you're busy and that you got a lot going on, but then you talk to some of the people like on your team or part of the student athlete society or something like that, just a casual conversation, and you realize, oh my God, everyone's doing this. I think I have a lot. There are people who are doing all this and working, like I had a couple jobs, but there were people who had like worked way more hours at their jobs in a week than I did. There were people who were starting up new clubs, not just running one, and doing all this stuff. I was like, okay, you guys are equally crazy and inspiring, because like I thought I had a lot going on, but you guys are a whole nother level. That I was talking about the sense of community, seeing the way people invested and used their own time to invest that into their community, the people that they cared about, just pushing things forward. It was incredible. So it made it easy to really get involved in a lot of stuff because everyone else was doing it too.
That's fantastic. Now, one thing that I want to dig deeper into is your student athlete experience. You've already kind of alluded to this, waking up early. Sounds like my nightmare, but I'm sure it was really beneficial for you. And you've actually talked about like the pros of the discipline, starting the day off right. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, what playing football at Williams was like. What did it teach you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, it was an experience I loved. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was tough in a lot of ways, but that's kind of what you sign up for. I think the values and like the benefits I got out of that experience are probably really relatable for anyone who's had not just an athlete experience, but any kind of team experience, whether it's theater, orchestra, anything where you need to work together as a group to achieve a common goal and work really hard to do it. I think they get a lot of the same experiences out of it. I'd say there are two main things that two values I can really point to that I really got out of it. The first one is working hard as a team to achieve a common goal. That is one skill that is hard. Learning not just how to push yourself, but how to organize a group and get the best out of each member in the group to achieve a common goal. Something that's really hard to do. And it requires a really tough set of skills that you can't learn in the classroom. And I think they're some of the most important life skills. So that was one thing that I really valued. I really got a lot out of it. And it's also one of the most fun parts of not just college, but life. Getting with people you like to do something that you think is important and to work your ass off at it, pardon my French, is something that's really rewarding, especially when it pays off. So that's the first one. The second one that I'd say maybe is a little more particular to football, but I'm sure is equally applicable to a lot of other things too. It's just toughness and discipline for sure. Not just in football, but in life. There's a lot that's going to be thrown in your face. You're going to get hit. You're going to get cut. There's a lot of bad stuff that's going to happen, and you need to learn to be resilient. You need to learn how to be yelled at and keep going and not take things personally. And I think that's really valuable. It's a really valuable thing to have to deal with some adversity in that setting and to emerge from that experience. So that toughness element, and also just the discipline to kind of keep going, to do what you know is right, or try to do the right things, even if they don't always pay off, is something that I'll never forget. And hopefully, they're lessons that'll stick with me the rest of my life.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I was wondering, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Do you have like a specific Williams football story? Maybe something related to the team, and a favorite experience?
Oh man,
you have?
My favorite Williams football experience. There's one that really sticks out. Well, there's a few that stick out. The one that really sticks out is our rivalry games against Amherst College. And if there's any Amherst alums or current students listening to this channel, put it on mute for a few seconds, because this might be an uncomfortable story for you. But Amherst, when I came to the Williams program, we were not a very good team. That was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to join, is because I wanted to be part of, a building back, something that we could look back on it and say, we left this program and this team better than we found it. That's something that really appealed to me, as opposed to joining a program that is very successful and you kind of just were there and rode the wave of success. So when I first joined Williams, we were we had, I think, a 2-6 season my first year, and then actually an 0-8 season one of my next years. So those were really tough years. But my junior year, played Amherst. We had a really good season. And Amherst is our big rival. They call the Williams-Amherst game the biggest little game in America, because we're two, small D3 schools, but there's a lot of people that care a whole lot about that game. They've been playing that game for well over 100 years. Wow. And a lot of people come back. It's the fourth oldest rivalry in all of football, and there's a lot of bad blood that goes back a long way. Actually, College Game Day, the ESPN group that will go to Texas versus Oklahoma or Michigan versus Notre Dame, the only D3 game they've ever gone to and brought their whole production to was the Williams-Amherst game. So it's a fun thing to be a part of, and people join the Williams program and the Amherst program just for the chance to work in that game, or to play in that game. So my junior year, after these really tough seasons where we were working really hard to try to build our team back, we had a lot of success, and we ended up playing Amherst at home for the last game of the season. It's always the last one, and it was just this thrilling game where we went up early, and then Amherst had a great comeback, and then they forced it into overtime. But we had a crazy turn of events where we ended up winning in overtime overtime. And after all the challenges on a walk-off defensive play, after all the challenges that we went through, all the hours you put in, everything is just flashing in your mind as you're screaming your head off and, celebrating with your teammates and everyone's going crazy. And then we have this tradition called the walk where you walk up the main street and they shut down, the police shut down the street, and, we're all marching up with everyone in town and people are throwing beers from the windows and everyone's going crazy. So that's something that sticks with you forever. That's why experiences like that are why you play a sport in college, and the memories you make with your friends and with your classmates and everything from that are phenomenal. So that's a definite highlight for me.
That is a really cool story. The biggest little game. Did not know that.
Biggest little game in America. Yeah.
Brendan, what position did you play?
I played a few different positions. I came in as a linebacker, ended up switching to defensive end. And then my last season, believe it or not, I actually played nose guard, which is crazy because I was about 80 pounds less than every guy that I went up against. And usually I was getting double teamed. So it was tough. So talk about adversity. That's it's a tough gig for sure, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we can make a sharp right turn from the sports academics as well, some of your work experiences, because you've done some really cool stuff there. But before we dive into the jobs and stuff, I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more about what is it like majoring in astro and econ? Like what do your assignments look like? What was your favorite class? Things like that. I'm just really curious.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not your typical double major, I would say. But again, this is one of those things where I felt comfortable doing it because there were people, especially at the liberal arts school, you have people majoring in, biochem and history. You have people doing all kinds. There are some people who triple majored. They're a little crazy, I think, but God bless them. That's a tough thing to do. But yeah, astro, I really was passionate about. I really liked it. I really engaged with the materials. That was kind of like where my heart and soul was learning about this stuff, and then to be able to express and understand the thing that you really love and are interested in a formulaic way and understand it at that concrete mathematical level was phenomenal. So that I really loved. Econ, I have a lot of respect for economics and I loved engaging with it. It was definitely more of, I need to understand this stuff because it's important to me. So the challenges of working both of those, one was diving in further and further and further to explore the thing that you really love was one challenge that I really relished. But also I love the challenge of, this is a subject that I'm less familiar with, but I need to have the discipline to study it and understand it because it is critical for me to be able to do what I love. It's critical to understand this, and that if I don't do this, the economics and business side of it, my knowledge and my love for astronomy and space in general will ultimately just be a passion and not one that I can sufficiently act on. So marrying those two was really interesting. And actually, I was pleased that I was able to merge them in some ways. Some of my junior and senior economic projects were, or just projects were like an economic analysis of India Space Organization. They have their space program. Their NASA is called ISRO, the India Space Research Organization. And it's a fundamentally different model for creating a space organization. And that was fascinating to me. And so I wrote reports on it. My senior thesis was about the evolution of not just the exploration of space, like how we did it and why we did it, but also the actual models that funded space exploration and the human use of outer space and how that matters, where the money comes from and how we are funding this and who's funding these different projects fundamentally shapes why we do it and how we do it and the outcome. And so translating that into the present day to understand where we are now and how we can have space exploration and use of outer space in the future that really benefits people is something that was very important to me. So, there are two avenues that seem like they're completely different parallel streets, but they, the extent that they merged was a really great experience for me. I'll give you one quick story that really resonated with me. My mentor was Dr. Jay Pasikoff, who is a eminent eclipsologist. So he loves and has been to like several dozen eclipses. So I was lucky to go on one eclipse trip with him. That's not what I'll talk about here. The experience was they have this collection of, at the Williams Archives, and I think he actually owns them, original astronomical texts. So for like a Galileo first edition, a Copernicus first edition, these things that like, you're not just learning about history, but like it's there, you're holding it. There was a whole class where they would just wheel in these books, and you would study them and talk about them and everything. And then at the end of the class, they would say, okay, we got a few minutes left, just go check them out. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, go check out this like Galileo book, like that's Galileo's drawings right there and everything like that. Like, yeah, just go check it out. I was like, I don't need to wear gloves. They're like, no, we don't really do the glove thing anymore, because that actually is worse for the pages, because you can rip them. And so that was like, I distinctly remember just like sitting there for my thesis research, like holding one of these books, terrified of ripping it. I washed my hands like 10 times before even coming close with it. And so sitting there reading these things, I was like, wow, this is surreal. And especially like owning to the fact that my love of space is deeply connected with the shared human experience of it, the history of it, kind of the past, present, and future. I felt that just sitting there holding this book, it was a surreal experience. And so if there's anyone interested in going to Williams, or if there's anyone at Williams right now, take that class. Please take that class. You will not regret it. You will get to touch and interact with a real piece of history, which still blows my mind.
Holding Galileo's drawings. Wow. All right. Wow, dude. These are amazing stories. I'm learning so much. I'm going to keep you here a little bit longer, because I really want to pick your brain and ask about these work experiences. I checked out your resume, which was so impressive. And as a college student, if you're in like the middle of college, like sophomore, junior year, the next stressor is work. Like, how am I going to find work?
Yeah.
When am I going to do it? What was that process like for you? How did you get your foot in the door? What work experiences were really formative and important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that stress of what am I doing next is one I can definitely relate to. As a college student, you have so much on your plate already that thinking about what am I going to do after this, it seems like almost an impossible goal. It's like, I have so much to work on now. I have so much to deal with now. It seems impossibly far away to deal with that. But it is really important to figure out. You've got to be always planning for the next step as you're going through it. I think that one thing that was really important to me was taking the time to figure out, what do I really like? What do I kind of, regardless of, job prospects or opportunities, or, am I going to be able to make money doing this or everything like that? What is something that gets me out of the bed in the morning that doesn't necessarily feel like work, that I want to study, that I want to talk with people about? And for me, there was a lot of soul searching and just kind of research, just understanding within the whole world of space, what is it that I really care about? And so I found out that I really care about helping build a future for space, using space and space systems as a tool to really impact and make a change for life and for people here on Earth. That's really what I care about. So although I'm fascinated in learning more about, distant worlds, I love learning about black holes and the real hard science element of it. And I'm glad people are doing that. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to figure out, how can we, as humanity expands beyond just our planet into low Earth orbit and medium Earth orbit, all these other things, how can we build a future in which space is a tool that helps all of us? So that is, with that in mind, and knowing that's really what was important to me, I started looking for how now, today as a sophomore in college or a junior, I can start understanding the problems and then eventually equipping myself for helping to address the problems and actually go about and build that future. So taking that one step at a time approach was something that was super helpful for me. Imagining 30 years down the line, who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? It takes hard work to be able to figure that out and to try to have that kind of picture in your mind. But it's really important, because it will guide you every step of the way, and you will never have that, well, what if, what if that was right or wrong? Because it'll really guide you. So just to be specific, knowing that that's what I wanted to do, I, for instance, knew I needed to get a great understanding of what is the role of our federal government in creating that future. Because it's still a huge, in terms of space, it's a huge role. It's, you can't talk about space without talking about NASA, about military organizations, about the players in the space ecosystem. So I spent a lot of time in DC, both as working in the House of Representatives and as a consultant, understanding what's going on, and then helping while I'm there make changes to bring the future I thought was better for everyone. And then kind of taking it one step at a time from those experiences to now being at the Space and Missile Systems Center, where there's a lot of activity as far as making sure that our use of space is benefiting not only our country and our national security and everything like that, but also one of the primary programs that I work on is the GPS system, which is a system, most people don't know this, is a system that is owned and operated by the U.S. Air Force, but is given away for free, the services of GPS, to over 4 billion users daily. And you can't imagine the modern day way of life around the world without the GPS, constellation of satellites as kind of a foundational infrastructure for that. These experiences really build on one another, and I think get you towards that image of who do I want to be 20 years from now. So that's been my approach, and it's made every day hard work, but a pleasure, at every step of the way.
Yes. Brendan, you have laid out like the strategy. Like this is the stuff that I wish I knew 4 or 5 years ago. Like picture your ideal version of yourself, 30 years from now. What do you wish you were doing? How can we get there one step closer with each opportunity? And it sounds like you were asking these hard-hitting questions early. As a young sophomore or junior, you're like figuring it out. I was like, I don't know how you did it.
Well, real quick on that point, I don't want to give the impression that I had it figured out and I was like, oh, I know exactly who I want to be, and so now I just need to go do it. There's a lot of kind of soul searching, and above all else, just like reading a lot, interacting with people who are in the space that you want to be in, that you think you want to be in, a lot, to figure out what does this life look like. And there's a lot of really tough choices, because at some point you need to pick, am I doing this or am I doing that? You can't do both. And that decision is something that still I have trouble with, is making the decision, opening one door and by that nature closing another door. That's something that's really tough, but I take solace in the fact that the dots always connect going backwards, and that all you can do in the present moment is work really hard, arrive at a clear understanding of who you are, what you want, and who you want to be, and then use your instincts and your best judgment to say this is the right thing for me. So trust your gut, do your research, trust your gut, and then don't look back.
Wonderful. So this kind of brings us to the present day. I want to hear more about your work as a senior consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton in Los Angeles, where you help space industry clients acquire space assets. It's just like mind-blowing to hear that.
It's a mouthful, yeah.
It's a
mouthful. It sounds cool on paper. Most of it is probably like any other job where, it's Word documents and spreadsheets and PowerPoints. The only difference is that at the end of all this, there's something's getting blasted into space, which is fun for me. It's a really unique experience, and it's one that I think my time both at Exeter and Williams have really prepared me well for, which is there's going to be a ton of information thrown at you that you're going to be responsible for, and you're going to know nothing about it. Some of these things you're not going to have any clue what they are before they're put on your plate. And I think that what my prior educational experiences have prepared me for is, how do I absorb this knowledge and deal with it in an actionable way? So those are skills more so even than my degree in astronomy that have helped me, which is kind of funny. I joke with some of my colleagues that I was like, I took a lot of astrophysics classes that most of them I maybe used one formula that I could have just Googled. So I don't know why I memorized this. Why did I go through all that when what I really should have been focusing on is, okay, what needs to be done? How do I work with people to do it? And hopefully have a good outcome. So it's been a great experience. I feel very lucky to be surrounded with people who are very passionate and very knowledgeable about what they do. It's a surreal experience for sure.
What would you say is like the best and worst part about your current job?
Oh man, that's a good question. The best part of my job, I'd say, is being where I am in LA, which is very much the hub of a lot of this activity. There are space startups right around the corner, from the SpaceX's of the world, which I was lucky to visit and go. I was like Disneyland for me going to that factory, to the very small ones, the ones that will be making headlines 3 or 4 years from now. So that being in an environment where the things that you've always read about and that you care about aren't just on the paper, but you can go out and talk to these people and touch, the space systems and everything like that is crazy. So that would definitely be a positive. The downside, that's tough. I would say that the downside is that it is a very challenging job. It can be very demanding, and like any job, it requires often some pretty long hours, some sacrifice. There'll be a lot of things that you really don't want to do, but you need to do it. And some of that can really be like disorienting, where you'll be working, long on a project, and you're telling yourself like, Brendan, this is what you always said you wanted, and now you're so lucky that you're able to do it. Brendan from 4 years ago would be thrilled to see what you're doing now, but you're not, like, at certain points, you're not actively enjoying it because it is still work, no matter how much you love something, there will be work involved. There will be, kind of the gritty parts that you just need to do it. And so that can be challenging, and that can really kind of throw you off, where you're like, is this really what I want to do? Is this, am I qualified to do this? If people are asking me to do something, I don't know if I'm the right person to it. You run into, the imposter syndrome. You run into the kind of self-questioning. You run into a lot of that stuff. But it's important to get through that if it is something you love, and it can be a really reaffirming thing. That's it's a blessing and a curse.
I hear you. So our time is almost up. I'm gonna leave you with one final question, which is, in many ways, Brendan today is a lot like the Brendan from Chicago as a kid, very literally kind of like starry-eyed, interested, passionate, disciplined, really taking like life by the horns and trying out lots of different opportunities. When it comes to space, it sounds like you still have that excitement and passion that you did maybe like more than 10 years ago. So my last question for you today is, like, what excites you most about the space industry, the future of space?
Oh man, where do I even start? I'll go back to the reason why I love space is because it is something that, for me, I kind of looked at, what do I care about? And what do I want to do? Which was, I care about something big that can connect me deeply to the human experience, but will also allow me to make a change and help people now and in the future. So for me, that was a pretty natural crossroads that led me to space. And I feel so lucky that the thing I just happen to be interested in is blowing up right now. We're in a moment, and I've written a lot about this. I've done a ton of research on this. The moment we are in now, in terms of the opportunities for human use of outer space, have never existed before. And we're entering into a period where no one can really say what is possible and what can or can't be done. I mean, there are companies now that are planning and actually launching so-called mega constellations, constellations of tens of thousands of small satellites that will enable us to do crazy things. One example is SpaceX's Starlink program that's providing satellite internet to reaches around the world that otherwise would have a really hard time getting access to internet. And we're really just scratching the surface, barely, of some of the crazy things that could be possible, the direct benefits back here on Earth, if we work really hard, if we work really smart, and we work together to bring about a future in space that is best for everyone. So I'm incredibly excited. I think that there's a lot of challenges, but I think that if you are someone who thinks they're interested in space, do it. Get involved. Join now, reach out to me, reach out to anyone else. There's a lot of smart people in this industry, a lot of people smarter than I am who are working on this stuff. So just jump in with both feet. The water's fine. It's a really cool place to be.
I'm gonna pick Brendan's brain after for a few more minutes because I am also really interested in SpaceX and Starlink. You mentioned funding space opportunities. Of course, like SpaceX's mission is to start a colony on Mars, make us a multi-planetary species, and the very idea that you could launch constellations of satellites to fund this mission is just kind of genius. And then really exciting thinking about the amount of innovation that could happen on Mars. A lot of times innovation is literal problem solving, so we'll be solving problems that we've never solved before. I personally believe that we'll see someone like a colony on Mars in our lifetime, probably even people born on Mars in our lifetime. So that's really wild to think about. But anyway, thank you, Brendan, so much for joining us. Any final words that you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to say thank you, Kev. Like I said, this is, I love your channel. The reason I wanted to do this is because I'm a big fan of your channel, and people have, as I told you earlier, people reached out to me just saying, hey, I don't know if you've seen Kevin's videos and everything, but they're fun, they're interesting. We all remember you from high school, and we all kind of loved you. We all thought you were a cool dude. You could break dance. We're all like, okay, I don't know how we can do that and be super smart and personable, but here we go. So I just thank thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. Great to see you. Great to catch up. I'm hoping that we can do this in person sometime and we won't have to do it over Zoom.
One day. Guys, so much for watching. Thank you, Brendan, again, for sharing your experience. It was one of a kind, and we will catch you guys at the next one. All right, guys, take it easy. Bye.